Hey everyone, it's Peter Kirk from Daydream Nation, and I've got John the Music Nut on the show. How are you?
I'm well. How about you, Peter?
Not doing bad at all. Today we are going to do a special show. So consider this. You're ahead of a record label. What are the two most bankable vocals or artists in the world of rock and pop? I'm talking about Robert Plant and Sting. There are a variety of bands that sounded like Sting, sounded like The Police, sounded like Robert Plant, sounded like Led Zeppelin, and went on to success either in the States or worldwide. John and I are going to focus on a couple each. So I'll throw it over to you, John. What's your first example?
Well, let's go to now. And Joshua Kiska of Greta Van Fleet. Now, this is probably the most popular rock band in a young rock band in the States right now. I've seen them move up from small theaters, and now they're an arena act. A lot of people correctly say they sound a lot like Led Zeppelin. Over time, their sound has changed. They're not as Zeppelin-esque as they used to be. But as soon as Joshua Kiska opens his mouth, you're like, yeah, very early Robert Plant. And musically, you do hear the influences. There are certain parts of songs that you're like, oh, they took this from Over the Hills and Far Away. They took this from Your Time Is Gonna Come. Over time, though, over the last few albums, and I listened to a new album today, they are getting more of their sound, but Joshua Kiska's vocal is right there up front. Very, very Robert Plant's. I think what's going to happen is these guys are very young, and I think as time goes on, if they continue their career, I mean, they're on a high right now, and I think it's gonna stay that way for a long time because not too many young rock bands are crossing over into the mainstream, but they are. I think over time, his voice is going to get richer and deeper. And then he's going to have his distinct sound, just like Robert Plant did. Because I thought he became a better singer later on in Zeppelin and with his solo career. So Joshua Kiska's, I think he's the first guy I thought of.
Yeah. So it's really funny. Since the first Led Zeppelin album that came out in 1969 to this very day, we're still talking about Zeppelin. They're legendary, ingrained into classic rock. And any new band that has a skerrick of a sound that indexes Led Zeppelin is brought up in lights. And this band, it's the vocals. Because I've got a couple of their albums and you cannot separate that this singer does sound like Robert Plant. Even Robert Plant's been interviewed about him. I don't think he's been too disparaging because I think it's more so that, he's a young up-and-coming band and, give it a little bit of support, a little bit of gravitas. But it's still a marketing tool to this very day where it's indexing or referencing a classic band to give the public some sort of idea what they're buying. Today, it's very competitive. Like in Spotify, YouTube, there's so much material out there, and you've got to have that kind of point of definition to, put your material out in front of the crowd. So in respect of this band, you've got to say, like Led Zeppelin. If you like Led Zeppelin, get this album. Otherwise, bar looking at an album cover or investing the time to listen to it. And let's face it, most of us don't have the time to invest in a lot of music. And that's why a lot of people feel safe when they go to the music store, going back to music that they know and listened to when they were 17. Right. But in respect of new bands, you've got to have an index, a reference point. Sounds like Robert Plant. Yeah. So that's why a lot of the remaining record labels, when they're signing up these bands, if they heard someone, oh, he sounds like Robert Plant. Let's sign him. They can see a marketing angle. Artistically, these guys would go, oh, I don't like it. I'm being referred to as a Robert Plant, but I think deep inside they wouldn't mind it because it gets them publicity. They get spoken about. And I think it was, Oscar Wilde said it's better to be spoken about than not being spoken about at all.
Right.
So that's my take on it.
Very good.
All right. Well, I'll go back in time to the 80s, and there was a lot of Robert Plant influenced bands coming out of the Sunset Strip or in hard rock. One of them was Kingdom Come. Now, this band originated from Germany. I didn't even know that they were German at the time. Did you?
No.
I didn't. The song was Get It On, and instantly it just sounded Zeppelin-like. It had that sort of Kashmir type riff, and the singer, Lenny Wolf, was definitely in that Robert Plant ballpark, even though his voice was kind of more of a helium, was a little bit higher, slightly different tone. That album, that self-titled album, had enough MTV rotation that it went to number 12 in the charts and went gold. They were slammed from pillar to post. And I think it was probably off the back of Whitesnake 1987, where there was a lot of Led Zeppelin references with David Coverdale and Still of the Night, which is very much Cribs Led Zeppelin. And Robert Plant sort of coming out in the press and calling him David Conversion. There was a lot of chat about Led Zeppelin, which I think Robert Plant didn't mind, because anything where people go back and buy in the catalogue, it's good for his royalties and good for his bank balance and enhances the legacy. It's nice that you're going to be influenced by somebody, and if it's going to be yourself. But getting back to Kingdom Come, it basically number 12 for a German band that didn't really tour much in America. And on the basis of that first song, that's not too shabby. The subsequent albums, I think the next follow-up album didn't do as well, called In Your Face, had the big speaker, and then they sort of had a bit of a dip. Jimmy Page actually, in an interview, said that out of all the album, he really, for Danny Stagg, was a great guitar player. So I think that's a bit of a compliment. But you never know with Jimmy whether he's being a little bit slightly tongue-in-cheek. What do you think of Kingdom Come?
When I heard about that band before they even had a record. There was a lot of buzz about Kingdom Come. Once that record hit, okay, it sold really well to get it on video. What Love Can Be got played a lot too. That was the video as well. What was interesting was they rose and the backlash was very swift. They, as headliners, they didn't get past theaters here. They played theater near my home, and Warrant were on their way up, and Warrant actually were opening for them, I believe. Yeah, or it was a co-headline, one of the two, but I know they played together, and I know Kingdom Come came on last. But what's interesting, though, is the backlash with them was so swift because everyone was saying it was too much like Led Zeppelin, but whereas a band like Greta Van Fleet, it's a different society now, because now we want something that we're familiar with.
Yes.
We want something that's going to celebrate the past. We're more of a nostalgic society now than we were in the late 80s. Now, the Kingdom Come album, I had that on cassette and I had that on CD at one point. It's a good album.
It is.
I didn't think they sound... Yes, there were Zeppelin influences there, certainly, but they were not as Zeppelin as Greta Van Fleet was early on. That I can clearly say. I mean, it wasn't to the point, okay, yes, Get It On with that. That was a bit of a Kashmir riff there. That's true. But there were other songs on there that weren't Zeppelin-esque, in my opinion. And plus, Lenny Wolf had already did a couple albums with Stone Fury at that point. So he was already being known. I mean, he didn't cross over. Stone Fury wasn't big here, but they did get their videos played on MTV. So I did like that first album. The second album, they were trying to get away from that sound, and then that album only sold a little bit based on name recognition alone, and then
it went down the dip, the slippery dip, so to
they
speak.
did, certainly.
Yeah. Look, I agree with Kingdom Come. There's songs like What Love Can Be, Living Out of Touch. It's not really Zeppelin musically, but Lenny Wolf undeniably has that Robert Plant tone.
Yes.
And that's the
Oh,
selling
yes.
point.
Mhm.
So I don't think that the record label would be complaining because Robert Plant type tonality to a voice or a Robert Plant sounding voice was very bankable and meant money.
Mhm.
And just on, my argument for this one is on the basis of Lenny Wolf's Robert Plant like voice, sold was the main selling point for this album and got them to gold status.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
yeah, that was it. I think I think it was like a once and done type of album with the Led Zeppelin, and as you said, when they explored it into the when they went into a different type of musicology, it didn't sell as well. All
And they
right.
put it out pretty, I'm sorry, they put it out pretty fast too, because the record company was thinking, okay, let's get something while the iron is still a little bit hot.
Yeah.
Because they put it out like about a little over a year after. And back then, bands were going 2 years between albums.
Yeah.
So, and so the record company saw it too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's your next pick?
Okay. Well, when Led Zeppelin broke up after John Bonham died, the industry was looking for the next Led Zeppelin. And this was an album or a band that was pushed to be the next Led Zeppelin, Zebra. Now, this came out in 1983. Randy Jackson is the singer and the lead guitar player. He sings a little higher than Robert Plant's, although he had a good lower register as well. Their sound was very Zeppelin-esque as well. This album hit number 31 in the States. It went gold. It had a couple AOR hits like Tell Me What You Want and Who's Behind the Door. And there was a lot. They did have a good buzz going on. They're a trio. They're still together, the same three guys. And when you go to see them to this day, they still play a lot of Led Zeppelin live. When I saw them in 2017, they did 4 Led Zeppelin songs. And they have 4 albums, all which are very good. They did go a little more pop as time went on. The keyboards got heavier into their sound. But Randy Jackson's voice was very high. They were trying to go on to that Led Zeppelin thing, because Zeppelin was so legendary. And the 80s, I mean, we saw bands that were singers similar to Robert Plant. There was always a big buzz. Oh, when's Led Zeppelin going to get back together? When are they going to have a reunion? Because they played Live Aid. So that buzz was there. It was certainly here with Zebra, and this is an excellent album. Highly recommend this. Great album.
I have that album, and they're making a comeback, I believe.
It's been a long time since they made that 4th album.
Yeah. But they're doing. I think I've seen it advertised. It's come back. It's come on my Facebook feed that they're doing a run of dates in America.
Oh, nice.
North America. So look out for it. So that's been a long time coming. So would you say it's more the band sounded like Zeppelin, or was it the singer that sounded like Plant? What was the bankable angle here? If I'm the record executive with Zebra,
ooh. Probably the singer sounding like Plant, Randy Jackson.
Okay.
I would say that's because musically, yes, there were some Zeppelin overtones, but it was more Randy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, the next one I'm going to talk about is Great White and Jack Russell. Now, in my view, Jack Russell is the closest out of those Sunset Strip hair metal bands that sounded like Robert Plant. Close your eyes, he sounds like Robert Plant. Examples would be Rock Me. It's got the timbre, it's got the tone and the light and shade of a Robert Plant in his peak. Lady Red Light, they were well known for their big hit, the Once Bitten, Twice Shy of Ian Hunter, but that's not really them. I think that was kind of a honky-tonk rocker type song, but when you listen to Great White, they're more of that. They do go into that Zeppelin, that bluesy sort of influence, but with a little bit of the hair metal edge, that those sort of guitar sounds that were very prevalent with those bands, the Dokken, the Rat, etc., etc. Blues with metal, a little bit of Aerosmith thrown in. But Jack White is definitely Robert Plant front and center, and he was the bankable aspect of that band, the voice. Probably not him from an image perspective, especially his image, because that was probably the demise of the band. He had a lot of substance abuse issues, alcoholism. There's a lot of other stories that you can just read on outside about the Great White, which is quite sad. But you've just, I'll ask the viewers to look at MTV Unplugged with Great White, and there's a version of Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and that just sounds like Robert Plant in Led Zeppelin classic, in that classic era. I went to the Whiskey A Go-Go for a crew fest with my wife, I think about 10 years ago, and Jack Russell was there and he did Communication Breakdown. And, he looks very frail. He wears the bandana, and the guy's, I think he's almost had a liver transplant, a perforated bowel. He's been on death's door many times, so he was like hunched over and didn't look like the glamorous rock star. But when he got on stage and he did Communication Breakdown, he was easily the best singer on the night. He had the tone, he had the licks, and he's got that gift. So I think this is an instance where the voice is the most bankable part of this band. And as a record executive, if I close my eyes and I'd say Robert Plant, Led Zeppelin, we can market this band. Bit rough around the edges, because even though they looked, they were kind of hair metal, but if you look at them, there's a little bit shagginess. There's a little bit not so glamorous. They're a little bit, bit mean. I don't know. What do you think of this band?
When Great White were, in regards to Jack Russell, I saw him last year. He still has that voice.
Tonality.
He still has that voice. He probably still has about 80% of his range too. But his back is in rough shape. Because when he was on stage, he said, my doctor said, I'm not supposed to be torn right now because I need back surgery. He was leaning up against a chair all night, but his voice was still fantastic. When I think of Great White, you're talking about the Zeppelin overtones and his resemblance with Plant, the drama. When he sings Save Your Love, when he sings House of Broken Love, when he sings Rock Me, that drama, that is when he and that band shine like the sun.
The light and shade.
That is when they put it all together. Yes, they could do the good boogie woogie rock tunes, and they do them well. But their coup de grace is the slow, emotional ballad. That is when they are at their very best.
The slow burn ballad.
Yeah.
That's when they're best.
Rock Me, to this day, you can never get sick of it. So,
yeah.
That's a long song, but it has to be long. Yeah. Because it has to bring you in and then keep you there with that drama. And then that last long note that he hits at the end of that song is magnificent. And leading into that great guitar solo. Yeah. So, but that's excellent choice. Great White.
Yeah.
Underrated, and then sadly no more for a tragedy than anything else, which is sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't think they got to superstar status because they're not pretty boys. I just think that, as I said in my earlier spiel, there was like a little bit of a bad boy edginess about them. They're not kind of poster boys, but oh my God, the voice. If you got a God
Yes.
gives talent, that was bankable. And it's quite ironic that, their most biggest hit was a cover song. There could have been many of their other tunes should have got them into the superstar status, but a boogie cover song. Why don't we talk about a bit of Sting? All right, so we've done a bit of Robert Plant. I've got this theory that Sting is one of the most, other than Robert Plant, the bankable sort of voices in pop or rock music. There are so many in the 80s right up to now that sound like Sting. So I'm going to talk about the Outfield. So I'm driving in a car, and I'm listening to this song called Your Love. And I thought it was a Police track or a Sting track, and did a little bit of research and found out it was actually a UK band called the Outfield. It was released in 1985 and it went top 10. Off the album Play Deep, which went double platinum. What do I know? They could barely get arrested in Australia. I've never heard of them. And in the UK, they did nothing. So they're one of those bands that could have done that show that we did a little while back about bands that were bigger outside their homeland, like the Fix.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Yeah, so Tony Lewis, bass vocals, John Spinks on guitar, and Alan Jackman on drums. And sadly, Terry is no longer with us, and also the guitarist John passed away before Terry. I've listened to their other songs, like Since You've Been Gone, all the way through. It's definitely got that Sting vocal hook, and you can see, like, Your Love sounds like a Police track. Maybe a little bit more polished, a little bit more poppy, less reggae, but the vocals, it's front and center with the Sting intonations. And you can imagine that the head of MCA Records saying, we need to get this, because Sting was a very bankable type of vocal in pop music. What do you think about this band?
When that song first came out, I thought that was the new Boston song, because Boston was going so long between albums. When that came out, I'm like, oh, it's the new Boston, finally, because his voice was a little like Brad Delp too. Now the Boston album came out a few months later with Amanda. Third Stage was the album. The Outfield were cool. They had about 7 hits here in the States, and they kept that up until they had a good 6-year stretch here. Now the big album was Play Deep, but every album after that, they were getting hits like For You, Voices of Babylon. Voices of Babylon's an excellent track. Closer to Me was their last hit here in the States. Later on, they were becoming more prominent on the adult contemporary charts, but their songs still rocked. I thought Closer to Me was that and Voices of Babylon were probably my favorites by them. But yeah, they were really good, and they had a nice stretch there. You thought maybe they'd be a one-hit wonder when Your Love came out, but they were able to sustain it for a while. Good band.
Yeah. Well, I put him on a parallel trajectory with the Fix. Similar, UK, couldn't get arrested in their homeland, and much bigger in the States. And I think they were signed to the same label, MCA.
Yes, that's true. Yes, the Fix were on MCA.
Yeah.
The Fix had a longer run, but yes, I mean, every time they have an album out, they'd have at least one big single off it. Yeah. And whether it was going to cross over in the pop charts or it was going to cross over on AOR. Like when you go to see them live, they're a band that's like one of those, oh, they sang that?
Yeah.
You ever see those bands where you think you only know a few songs by them? And then there's a few more. By the end of the night, you're like, oh, that was the Fix.
Look, if I have a blank look on my face when you're rattling it off, it's because there wasn't much of the Outfield in Australia, if all. I've got a vague recollection of Your Love, but as I said, it's just when I heard it for the first time, I thought, oh, Is this a Lost Police track? And the thing about Sting, it's not the mid-range or the lower range that's the bankable. It's when he hits the high notes. When he's going into the higher range, that's when, the comparisons with Sting come into play. So, all right, what's your next pick?
Well, I know we talked about this off air, but the one I thought of was Gotye or Gotye.
Gotye.
Gotye, thank you. I was trying to. How do you pronounce this? I remembered the song.
Yeah.
Somebody I used to know was the hit of the year here. It was a worldwide smash. But when that came out, a lot of people thought that was Sting. I mean, I didn't think it was Sting, but it was similar to Sting.
Yeah.
Musically, it wasn't Sting, I don't think, but the voice certainly was. But yeah, that was his only big hit that I know of. But he was the first one I thought of. I was reading today, he refuses to take royalties from YouTube, which I found interesting. I don't.
2 billion hits. It's I think it's the fourth most popular YouTube clip of all time, and it's had 2 billion hits. And it certainly set up Kimbra, who's the guest singer on this. His real name is Wally DeBacker. He's still playing in a band called The Basics, and man, it was a fireball. He got a Grammy, got Australian awards, you name it, he got it. And it was just one of those songs that was like a lightning in the bottle that everyone got.
Yes.
I hated it at the time because it was just overplayed to death. But I was watching it last night and I kind of found it quite affecting, and I kind of felt nostalgic. And it was only 2011 that it came out. So I think sometimes distance is a wonderful thing in music. When you hear something too often, no matter how good it is, if you take a spell and you come back to it, it's a good way to reappraise music. And it's a great song. You've got to call a good song a good song. And there's one reason why it got 2 billion hits is because it's great. It picks up a collage of, I think he played royalties because the actual melody was some Brazilian pop song.
Okay.
So it wasn't totally original, but the way he put it together was kind of genius. And the lyrics are just heartfelt. It's about a relationship somebody used to know. Everyone's had that.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel about this song? Have you listened to it recently or?
Just recently, just to check it out again. But I never despised it because I didn't like the pop music from that time, but that one was an earworm to me. That stuck right out. I never bought the album. You heard the song so much as it was. But it never was to the point where I turned a channel. I just thought it was a very unique song for its time when you had a lot of, this is by the point you kind of had to search for good music on the radio. And you had to search for your Arcade Fires, for example. So because they weren't getting played on the radio here, but they had a very, very strong following. But that song I loved from the word jump, because I'm like, this is really interesting, and it's good, and it's catchy, and that vocal and the chorus in particular.
That's definitely an exhilarating high point. So I find there are 3 components to the song. You've got the slow build up, and you've got kind of the xylophones. So you're sort of drawn into the song, and then it picks up the pace, and then he puts in he kind of switches gears into the Sting voice. And you're going, is this Sting? If you didn't know it. So imagine you're in America and you're listening to this and you don't know who this is. You wouldn't even have a clue that's this some Australian pop artist, never heard of. Switches gears and you've got the Sting voice. Oh, it's a Sting song. And then you've got this female vocal, which is great because she's talking about from her perspective, her take on the relationship, and switches it. To me, that's the high point of the song, because it's just from his perspective about what was happening. So it switches to the female perspective, and then they do the kind of the duet, and it just soars and never lets up. So I think it's one of those songs that's probably got a couple of peaks, emotional peaks, and that's why it was just so, it swept so many people in.
Another thing, it didn't sound like anything else, because everything has been done to death. When something like that comes along, you're going to pay attention. Oh, this is interesting. This is really good. I want more of that,
Well, in the context of this show, it did help that he had the Sting voice, didn't it?
Yes.
So if he didn't have the Sting voice and he sounded like somebody else, I don't know if it would have done as well.
I don't think it would have.
Sting has got the golden tone. It's bankable. As I've got some more examples, but it just added to the bankability of this song that people, I reckon there were just so many people that just listen to it and go, oh, is that Sting? Or it sounds like Sting. If it sounds like somebody that is got a track record of hits, big following, influential, then they're bankable. And this was a bankable song.
No doubt about it.
The funny thing is, this guy, he folded up Gotye after this and never recorded anything under that. He just did put something on YouTube and said, we're done. So he could have continued, but 2 billion is nothing to sneeze. That is mega.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No doubt about it.
Love 2 billion hits on this video, actually.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be cool.
Please.
Yeah.
All right. What's your... Oh, that was your pick. My pick.
That was mine.
Men at Work. Now, Men at Work, I don't think were kind of contrived in the sense that they sounded like the Police or sounded like Sting. But I just think it was in their DNA. They were very similar in a lot of their musicology. It didn't hurt that Colin Hay had that tone in a lot of their songs that was in the ballpark of Sting. So it didn't hurt that many of their songs, the biggest hits, Colin Hay had that Sting tonality, like Overkill, where he hits that higher range.
Right.
Who Can It Be Now has that sort of that vocal range. They were huge in the States, like Business as Usual went to number 1, 6 platinum, and Cargo, I think hit number 3 platinum. So what's your views? Do you think it was because the Police were quite big in the early 80s, 78 to 83, and around that time, you had Ghost in the Machine and Synchronicity, like uber huge for Police. Anything that was in the sphere on popular radio that sounded like the Police would give them a leg up, and therefore they'd be bankable. Now, Men at Work played the traps of the Sydney, the Melbourne pubs. I don't think they were ever contrived to be a Police band, but as I said earlier, because they, sounded similar and there was a little bit of musicology that was similar, I don't think it hurt. What do you think?
They didn't really sound like the Police, but there were like nods to the Police. They had a sax player who was really prominent in that band, and you had some sax on Ghost in the Machine. They didn't have a sax player, but they did have sax on that album pretty heavy. So, yes, Colin Hay's high tenor voice was certainly part of it. And the way he used his voice, you were mentioning Overkill. I think what really makes that song was after the solo in the song, and Colin sings that vocal and he goes into a higher register. I think that's what really makes that track. And that is a wonderful song.
So I agree. I just think when he hits the upper register, that's where he's sort of like in that sort of sting tonality.
Absolutely.
And that's extremely bankable. But look, some of their songs have that, that faux reggae feel to it.
It's a
That's in the
mistake.
ballpark, yes. But that may be referencing and indexing the Police, but I'm just thinking because of the tonality, and it's just, luckily he had that particular tone. I think that probably added 1 or 2 million to their sales because the Police and Sting was such a bankable artist at that particular time.
You couldn't avoid Men at Work in the summer and fall of '82.
Yeah.
Because both of those singles, Who Can It Be Now and Down Under, hit #1. And they had these really good hooks too, with the sax in Who Can It Be Now and the flutes in Down Under.
Yeah.
They had these great hooks to them, just like the Police did with their biggest songs.
Yep. All right. Have you got any other ones that you'd like to spotlight or any honorable mentions?
Yeah, Dave Wakeling from the English Beat, and a little bit musically, but Dave had that high tenor voice, and he knew how to use it in certain parts of the song that would really jump out at you. I mean, musically, it's a ska band, okay, but there are elements of ska in the Police. Like a lot of people say, oh, Regards a Blank, white reggae. Well, there was some ska there too. So I was thinking Dave Wakeling, I mean, to this day, he still has that high tenor. I went to see him recently, and he had a very distinctive sound for that kind of music, and it was very similar to Sting. And if you think about when they were really doing well in the early '80s, that was at the same time that Sting and the Police were coming out with Zenyatta Madada and Ghost in the Machine as well. So yeah, Dave Wakeling, that would be my choice.
Well, good pick. English Beat. I always get those bands confused because there were two great bands called the English Beat, Ska, and the Beat, which were power pop legends. And I've done a few shows about them, but that's a great choice. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, I was going to bring up Wang Chung because in Jack Hughes, I hear a lot of the tonality of Sting in his in vocals. And again, I don't think that, it hurts them commercially. Let's Go, Party Tonight, Dance All Days, even when they did the wonderful soundtrack for To Live and Die in LA, which is a minor masterpiece. And you've got to check that album out because it's so different to their commercial pop stuff, which is a lot of fun. I think it was Billy Freakin was very inspired to pick this band and plonk them in and do a soundtrack, because this is just the perfect mix of a soundscape, electro, a little bit of pop, a little bit of rock, matching what was a mid-'80s crime thriller, which is probably, in my opinion, probably one of his last great films, but totally inspired. But getting back to Jack Hughes, he's definitely got that tonality of Sting in regards to the upper register, and I don't think it hurts at all, even in their pop songs. I think that's fine. I will hang my hat that I think Plant and Sting were the most bankable vocalists in that era. You know, Plant going back to the 70s and people wanting to look for the new Led Zeppelin and the new Robert Plant, and Sting, who was, relatively still around and I think very popular, and anyone just even copying or just being in that ballpark, being very bankable. And I think the evidence is there by selling a lot of records and getting into the charts.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you, John. You can see John on a lot of different channels, Grant's Rock Warehouse and the Contrarians. Please like and subscribe. to Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us any artists that you think were mining the Robert Plant and the Sting wheelhouse in regards to vocals. But one thing's for sure, we'll be doing a show here very shortly, and we will catch you later. Cheers. See you later. Bye.
Cheers.